Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about SOFI stock. Just today they are up almost 5%. They've been a public company for almost 5 years now, and they are a financial services company. They hit a high recently of 1842. I believe that was at the beginning of the year. They hit about 1842, and then obviously alongside the rest of the market, at the beginning of the year, it crashed all the way down to about 950. So it got cut roughly 50% in half, and then since then, in the last roughly 5 trading days, the stock's been doing really well and been bouncing back off of those lows pretty good, and we're trading back up into the around $13 range. So in today's video, I just want to talk about what SOFI does, how I think about them as an investment, and if I would add them to my personal portfolio. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. My name's Sheldon. This is my portfolio. I have around $77,000 invested. These are all of the stocks that I own. And guys, I do not claim to be an expert here. I am just some guy that likes to invest in the market and share what I've learned along the way. So subscribe to the channel if you want to join me on that journey, and let's all build our portfolios together. Okay, so let's get right into it, and I want to start by giving just a general overview of SOFI. So on a year-to-date chart, they're down 16%. On a 1 year, they're up 69%, which is really good for a 1 year chart. And on a 5 year, it's only up 17. So, I mean, it's trading pretty flat on a 5 year, and that's not really what you would want in terms of gains on a 5 year investment, but they are a $14 billion market cap company. Their trailing 12-month revenue is $2.6 billion. Net income is 480, let's call it. And I believe like 2024 was their first year of true profitability, and we'll dive into the numbers later in the video. They have a 40, call it a 40-cent EPS, so 40-cent earnings per share, and then their price to stock to earnings per share ratio is about 32.77. So that is, like, generally speaking, the price to earning ratio is a little high if you compare it to something like the S&P 500, but on like in a financial sector basis, it is a little bit more expensive, right? Like in the financial sector, you typically see even lower price to earnings ratio. So it is a little bit expensive when you look at it on a financial sector basis, but it's not too high if you look at it in a general, more broad basis. And they do have good growth rates, which we'll get into. So honestly, it doesn't strike me as being the most expensive and overvalued investment right now, and we'll get into the reason why further in the video. So, I mean, so what does SOFI do? They have, this is just their homepage of their website. They have personal loans, banking, like you can get a checking account with SOFI, credit scores insights, mortgage loans, student loan refinancing. They have their own investment app. I've never used it, and honestly, if anybody out there is watching this video and you use SOFI Invest, let me know how it is, because I haven't used it. I don't know. So I'm assuming it's probably pretty solid. The rest of their like the user interface, and they typically have good design for everything. So I don't know. That's just, I'm interested if anybody out there uses SOFI to invest. Let me know. Drop a comment how that platform is if you enjoy it. They also have private student loans, credit cards, insurance, and I believe you can book like trips and travel. So they're kind of this one-stop shop for all financial services, and that's kind of how they're trying to position themselves in the market. And like, if you look at their products, they have a lot of products. Like I don't even know, like you couldn't even go through all of these products in a single video, but yeah, basically one-stop shop for financial services. And then the way that they break them down in, like, you can break all of their products and services down into 3 separate segments. And so like segment financials here, they have their lending segment, they have their technology platform segment, and their financial services segment. So if we scroll up, this is just their earnings presentation. If we scroll up right here, like I said, one-stop shop for financial services. So they break it into lending, and within their lending segment, they have like personal loans, student loans, home loans, and then financial services is like SOFI Money, which I believe is their checking accounts and like their banking. Then SOFI Invest, SOFI Credit Card, and etc. All of those products as well. Now, the technology platform is something that I actually find really, really cool. And I believe, I don't remember how long ago, it was like 4 years ago maybe, I think, or 2021, that they acquired. It's not that slide, it's this slide. They bought a company called Galileo, or that's the name of the platform. It's called Galileo, and this gives clients the ability to create and launch and run financial products. So it's actually pretty cool. If any of you guys out there wanted to start some type of payment solution app or any type of digital like fintech business, this is their website. You could use something like Galileo, a competitor to Galileo. I don't know if you've ever heard of Plaid or Plaid, I think it is. One of those two. But they also do the same thing. They're not a public company. It's more of a private startup. But they just have, like, if you ever wanted to start a credit card in any type of banking solution, this is like the pipeline that can run an app like that, like B2B payments, banking, crypto, embedded finance, investing. So if you wanted to start an investment platform and you wanted your users to be able to put money in that account, you could use something like Galileo. So pretty cool app. I'm not sponsored, obviously, by Galileo, but that is, and I don't even think that they have the most revenue, and it's a relatively slow growing platform. And we'll dive a little bit further into their financials there. But yeah, they only do, in terms of their technology platform, net revenues for the last quarter was 102 million. So yeah, not crazy, especially when you compare that to their lending segment, and it's a little bit less than their financial services. But the big segment here is their lending segment. And if we take a look at their leadership team, just to see kind of who the CEO is, Anthony Noto is the CEO. And I'm not going to lie, this guy does have a pretty impressive resume. I think, yeah, if we pull it up here, right now, obviously, he's the CEO of SOFI, but he was also the COO, Chief Operations Officer of Twitter, and the CFO of Twitter. He worked in investment banking at Goldman Sachs. He worked as the Chief Financial Officer of the NFL. He was also an associate at the Lehman Brothers. Rest in peace. Great financial crisis. So he's got a pretty good resume. I haven't dove like too far into SoFi. Like, I've just done some initial research, like I said, or if I did say this already, I don't know. I don't actually own the stock, and I've been kind of doing my research because it is an interesting investment. And I do have an answer, though, if I would add it or not add it to my portfolio based on what I've looked at so far. And just looking at Anthony Noto and his resume and what he's done with SoFi over the last couple of years, he seems to be a pretty solid leader, and I haven't really seen anything that is too negative about him at all. Also, SoFi obviously owns SoFi Stadium. That's what most of you have probably heard of, is SoFi Stadium. If you've ever heard the name SoFi and don't know what they do, it's probably because you've heard of SoFi Stadium. So they had a naming rights deal. Ooh, whoops, I'm not supposed to be still drawing here. But they have a naming rights deal, a total of $625 million by the end of the contract, that's a beefy contract. $30 million annually over a 20-year period, for an aggregate total of $621 million. And the stadium, not going to lie, the stadium's pretty sick. If any of you guys are Chargers fans or like football or anything, like, it's just a massive, really cool stadium. And these aren't, like, I think these are just generated pictures, but it's a cool stadium, and I'm sure most of you guys have probably heard of it. And so let's dive a little bit further into the financial side of things. And if we look at their financials here, and let's say, for example, look at revenue growth, they've had really good revenue growth ever since, like, even probably before 2020, but that's what is displayed here. They had 27, 72, 55, 36, 27% revenue growth rates year over year, which those are very, very solid revenue growth rates, especially in the financial sector. And net income, if we look at their net income, obviously they lost money every year from 2020, and then 2024 was their first full year where they flipped to be a profitable company. And if we look on a quarterly basis, where is their net income here? Yeah, there we go. So their first profitable quarter ever was Q4 of 2023. They flipped 37 million, then they went to 77, then they went back down to 760, and then Q4 2024, they had a crazy quarter, and they hit $332 million of net income growth. And you can kind of see that the trend line of the stock, like the price of the stock, is kind of fluctuated with these numbers. And like, for example, their first quarter of profitability was Q4 2023. And if we look at their stock chart, I do believe maybe on a 5-year Q3, like in 2023, it started to really climb here. And then it went back down, and then it started to really push up as the market was like really fueling into like a euphoric state in the market, right? Coming into 2025. The market was going crazy coming into this year. So they've really recently turned profitable. If we look at their profit margin, it's at 18% currently. One thing that like isn't ideal still with a company like SOFI is it has really bad free cash flow margins, and they lost even in the last 2 years, like they were down $7 billion in free cash flow, $7 billion in free cash flow, $1.2 billion, which is in the right direction, absolutely in the right direction. Especially like if you look at the margin, like down almost negative 500% free cash flow margin. That's kind of crazy. Negative 350%, negative, and now it's down to negative 50. So it's going in the right direction. And as an investor, if they were able to flip their free cash flow to be free cash flow positive, that would definitely, in my opinion, be a catalyst for the stock price to go up. So there's lots of catalysts in front of SOFI. Like if it ever grew to be, S&P 500 status, which it's still very far away from that. NASDAQ 100, kind of what happened to Palantir. One of the first main catalysts did already happen, like that initial flip into being a profitable company. When businesses go through that, that's typically a positive catalyst for the stock price. If we look at, for their balance sheet, for example, we can see that their total assets are 36 billion, total liabilities are 29. So I believe that's their current ratio, should be positive. And if we pull up their ratios here, current ratio is assets and liabilities. If we look at, let's say, for example, price to sales is, you can see it here, is the market cap divided by revenue. So price to sales is the multiple that the market cap is at from the revenue. So, and typically for high growth companies, this is a very high number. Like if you do Palantir, for example, I think their price to sales number was like, I don't know, close to 100 or something. And I understand completely different sector, not a very good benchmark in terms of doing it, benchmarking it for SOFI, a completely different company. But still, it's relatively low. Like I don't see SOFI as being this wildly overpriced stock right now, and maybe it's because there's just been a pullback in stocks recently. But even their price to earnings, like their price to earnings ratio is only 32. I think the S&P 500 right now is at like a 27, 29 price to earnings ratio. So it's honestly, it's looking like a pretty solid investment. So another thing that I want to look at here is they do release guidance, and I believe it is in this presentation. They released, so their 2024 actual in terms of annual growth for revenue was about 35%. It might be a sandbag, but on the low end, they're guiding for 23%, and on a high end, they're guiding for 26%. So, I mean, coming off of, like, SoFi's pretty hot right now. They're growing pretty rapidly, and so they had a 35% growth rate, and so to guide for a 23 to 26%. I mean, the reason companies might do this is so that they come in and obviously beat those expectations, and that just looks good, right? To beat expectations. I do think that they could come in and beat this number just off the research that I've done so far. So if we look at, so these are the guidance for their earnings coming out in just a couple days here. So they're guiding to have, again, kind of 25 to 28% revenue growth on the quarter. So we're going to see that. Adjusted EBITDA is going to come in at, so 2024 Q1 actual was 144, and then the low end they're guiding 175, high end they're guiding 185, so we'll see where those numbers come in. And if they come in and crush all 4 of these guided numbers, you know, that could definitely be a positive catalyst for the stock price. So am I personally buying this stock? And I'll tell you how I see this kind of fitting into my strategy here. Because I do like SoFi as an investment, right? I think it's a solid company. It's a rapidly growing company. I understand where their products fit into the marketplace. And so this is how it could fit into my strategy. Like, for example, I have a Palantir and a Meta, right? A Palantir is more that smaller growth stock, and then the Meta is like the big dog. In terms of a big dog in the finance industry, I have a JP Morgan. I don't really have a small growth fintech company in my portfolio. That's something that's kind of missing. And one move that I could see myself doing here, and I've been playing with selling my Apple shares a little bit. I haven't sold a single share, and I've held I've held onto my Apple position for like, I don't even know, like 4 or 5 years probably now. But what's the opportunity that I see? Do I see holding SoFi for 5 years or holding Apple for 5 years? Which one do I see as a higher rate of return? And I do see Apple as a bit of a safer play, but potentially that high potential upside for something like an Apple versus SoFi, I'm not sure if it's there. So I could go through, maybe sell, like replace my Apple shares with a SoFi position. That's one thing that I'm thinking about doing. I haven't actually obviously pulled the trigger on that yet, and I'm waiting to see their earnings and do a little bit more research on the company. I do see myself adding it into my portfolio in the future, though, just to give the short answer to the question. It's an interesting company. I like the products and services they provide. I think they're useful. I think it's an exciting play as well. Like, it's only a $14 billion market cap company, and their market cap hit a high of what, like 20 billion, probably roughly 20 billion. So it's off its highs by about $5 billion or $6 billion in terms of market cap. And I don't think like they've seen their best days. I think there's lots of growth ahead for SoFi. And I think it could be a really interesting add and an interesting play for the portfolio. But I am really curious as to what you guys think about SoFi. If any of you have it in your portfolio, or if you've used any of their services, let me know what your experience with them was. I'd love to hear firsthand from people if they've had a good or bad experience with it. I have looked up some reviews, but if you guys have any interesting stories or experiences, I'd love to hear them below. That's pretty much all I wanted to say in today's video. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one. I have a couple interviews coming up with CEOs and investors, so I know you're not going to want to miss that. They're going to be very interesting videos, and I'm excited to release them. Thank you so much for watching the video. Drop a like if you enjoyed it. Best of luck on your investment journey. Peace.